You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, we have some pretty big news here. Two of Trump's Mar-a-Lago employees were found to have moved boxes of papers the day before the FBI visited Mar-a-Lago. What impact does this have on the case against Trump?
Brian, this only strengthens the case that Donald Trump was obstructing justice. It sure looks like, with the assistance of others, with the complicity of others, it sort of feels like a conspiracy to obstruct justice. It's pretty remarkable. The Washington Post reporting, I think the Washington Post was the first to break this news, that Trump and company were engaged in dress rehearsals. In other words, they were practicing what they would do with these classified documents that Donald Trump stole from the federal government. He had no right to take them to his Florida home at Mar-a-Lago. He was unlawfully retaining them at Mar-a-Lago. And now we have reporting that they were conducting dress rehearsals right up to the time when the Department of Justice sent FBI agents and federal prosecutors, including Jay Bratt, the head of the counterintelligence section of the National Security Division. I worked with Jay when he was a national security prosecutor at the DC U.S. Attorney's Office. The day before these people went down to retrieve documents Donald Trump should not have, it now looks like Trump and company were moving boxes around. I mean, the only reasonable inference is to hide things and not return them to the FBI agents and the federal prosecutors who were coming down to retrieve them. This is damning evidence. It's evidence that goes directly to Donald Trump's intent to commit the crime of obstructing justice. And I have to tell you, Brian, I can't wait for prosecutors to have their, feet in the well of a courtroom arguing this to 12 jurors in the jury box, sitting as the conscience of the community, because I maintain, with all of the evidence they are amassing against Trump and company, this case is going to try itself.
To that point about the dress rehearsals that Trump and his allies had moved sensitive papers before they received subpoenas for those documents. Again, you had mentioned that this would suggest that they knew how to do this and yet made the conscious decision not to. So how are prosecutors going to be able to factor that in to proving his intent to commit a crime when they actually do go to trial?
If the evidence pans out and it shows that Team Trump were nefariously engaging in dress rehearsals to try to keep these documents from being returned to the federal government, the rightful owner of the documents, that is going to so resonate with the jurors. Here's what I would do if I was a prosecutor. I would say, ladies and gentlemen, how many bank robbery movies have you seen where the bank robbers get together in advance of the planned bank robbery and they got the getaway car? They're, using the stopwatch to time how long it's going to take to get into the bank, how long it's going to take to crack the safe, how long it's going to take to outload the money and get away from the scene of the crime. How many movies have we all seen with, that theme, that narrative? Well, here you have that playing out in living color with Donald Trump and company in a conspiracy to unlawfully retain these documents and obstruct justice by not returning them to the federal government. That's the kind of storyline, Brian, that I think all jurors can kind of latch onto and appreciate, what was really going on. You have both the dress rehearsals and then you have the reporting about how the day before the FBI agents and the federal prosecutors were to arrive at Mar-a-Lago to retrieve the documents Donald Trump should not have had, they're moving boxes around. They're not doing that to facilitate making sure all of the documents go back. How can we say that? Well, because when they went down there, they gave over, I think, a few documents, but the FBI and the Department of Justice knew they had other evidence that they hadn't returned them all. So they applied to a federal judge for a search warrant for Mar-a-Lago. And lo and behold, when the judge issued that search warrant, there were still 100 or more classified documents, including in Donald Trump's desk drawers. This will end up being a powerful case on the evidence.
Glenn, how would prosecutors even know this information? Like, is this evidence that someone at Mar-a-Lago is cooperating with them?
Oh, there's a mole at Mar-a-Lago. There are any number of moles. Of course, there's security footage some of which I believe was subpoenaed and was received by the federal prosecutors. It's probably been presented to the grand jury by now. It could very well be that the feds are up on a wire, as we put it. You can apply to a federal judge for what we generally refer to as wiretap or Title III information that allows us to surveil, to listen in real time to what people are talking about on the phone. I mean, the possibilities are endless when it comes to those kind of covert investigative steps the feds can engage in when they're involved in this kind of a covert operation. So I have a feeling at the end of the day, we're going to see all kinds of evidence at trial about people who were at Mar-a-Lago and providing information, whether wittingly or unwittingly, in real time.
Glenn, how does a big development like this impact the timeline of the case? Because there were indications that the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case was actually wrapping up prior to this.
Yeah, so I noticed in the Washington Post article, there was a suggestion that this may actually extend the time frame for indictments. I don't know that we can suffer any more extensions of time before Donald Trump is held accountable for at least some of his crimes. But the reality is, the more information that pours in like this, the more the prosecutors have to assess it. They have to present it to the grand jury. They may have to subpoena additional witnesses to fully develop the information before they can move forward to asking the grand jury to return indictments. So it wouldn't surprise me that even though these feel like really important evidentiary developments, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see indictments any quicker than we otherwise would have. It might actually, as I say, extend the time for indictments to be returned by the grand jury.
Well, isn't it also possible that investigators or prosecutors already knew about this? That just because it's being reported now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's new information for investigators themselves. So the timeline may also just be the same. It's just that we're finding out new information now.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some really good, creative, aggressive investigative journalists out there, but every once in a while you will see reported for the first time that there was some new investigative avenue taken by the prosecutors, as evidenced by subpoenas that were issued. And then you continue to read on in the article and it says, we just learned about these subpoenas, but they had been issued 3 months ago. So you're exactly right. Sometimes the reporting lags behind the evidence that's being developed by the feds. But you know what? Sometimes the reporting can even be out front if the reporters have sources on the inside of investigations who can say, you know what? It looks like there are some investigative steps about to be taken. And that's when the reporters can actually get out in front of a story.
I know this is a little bit of an impossible question to answer, but judging by this development, what do you think a rough timeline would look like right now?
Yeah, how many times have we predicted the charges were imminent, only to be disappointed?
Let's continue to be masochistic here and just
nobody will accuse me of learning from my mistakes. Here I go again.
Right.
I do feel like, and I think there's been some reporting on, as soon as June 1st or shortly after June 1st, we may see our first federal indictment. That may be a little ambitious. I do have a feel like Jack Smith is reaching the end game, at least on the classified documents investigation, maybe not necessarily on the insurrection investigation. But, I am still hopeful that we're going to see any number of criminal indictments of Donald Trump come sometime this summer.
Do you think that Jack Smith, once he's ready to bring this case to trial, that he will, independent of the ongoing January 6th insurrection case?
I think he probably will. You can definitely look at all of the crimes Donald Trump seems to have committed, many in the harsh light of day, dating back to 2016, in his attempt to acquire the presidency unlawfully, Russia, if you're listening, for example, and then running through his presidency, the obstruction of justice as documented by Bob Mueller, the bribery and extortion of President Zelensky using congressional funds, and on and on and on. And it sort of culminates in the insurrection, in Donald Trump's attempt to unlawfully retain the power of the presidency. Now, as an old prosecutor, I can look at all of that and I can see an umbrella conspiracy under which we could bring all of those charges, because they're all motivated by pretty much the same thing from Trump's perspective. I want to get hold of the presidency. and I want to unlawfully keep hold of the presidency. I will say that the documents crimes, the classified documents crimes, feel a little bit separate and apart from that. To me, it looks like Donald Trump trying to exploit, probably for financial advantage, all of those documents that he stole. And there's also some reporting now in the new Washington Post piece about how, he would not only keep those documents in his office, but he has been known to show people those documents. So I have a feeling that will be the first federal charge, and it will be independent of what I think will be a conspiracy to defraud or commit offenses against the United States. That will be the insurrection.
Okay, well, obviously a lot to keep an eye on as this case continues to build and as we continue to find more information in the media, and hopefully soon enough we'll have some court date or trial date, and we can finally get into the meat of this thing. So with that said, if you want to follow along, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.